The instant my tires met that unpaved track, I sensed something was amiss. The atmosphere felt unusually dense, unnervingly still, as if the surrounding forest was holding its breath. When the trees parted, my cabin was no longer standing. It was reduced to rubble, with wisps of smoke curling across the open space like a lost spectre. Then I saw it. My watch, a testament to 20 years of service, lying in the mud. As I moved towards it, the bulldozer rumbled forward and deliberately crushed it before my eyes. The operator, grinning, leaned out and bellowed, "Go ahead and sue us, old man." They presumed me to be helpless, utterly unaware of my true identity. I had never intended to return to these mountains, not after spending 2 decades in the fraud unit of the Clark County Sheriff's Department. You spend that much time pursuing deceivers, swindlers, and bureaucrats in polished footwear, and eventually the world begins to feel claustrophobic, constricting, like a corridor that's steadily closing in. So when I walked out of the department for the final time, my badge and firearms surrendered, I made a vow to myself: find a serene sanctuary, a place where no one could locate me. That haven materialized as an old A-frame dwelling nestled deep within Redwood Creek, a pocket of pine trees and crisp air situated about a mile beyond the boundaries of the Redwood Crest HOA. I acquired it from the Lancaster family, a lineage of ranchers who had owned the land for generations. The deed was straightforward, old-fashioned, and elegantly uncomplicated. Private property, unburdened by HOA regulations, shared ownership, or disputes. Precisely the kind of location where a man weary of the world could finally exhale. The very first morning I stepped onto that porch, the mountainous terrain felt like a fresh start. It was cool, tranquil, and blessedly free of anyone dictating my actions. I recall thinking, perhaps now I'll finally get around to writing that blasted book. However, tranquility proves fleeting when confronted by individuals who believe a clipboard bestows them authority. The initial disruption occurred on my second visit. I was driving in with my morning coffee when a white SUV bearing a Redwood Crest security emblem swerved across the road, effectively blocking my path. The man who emerged wore mirrored sunglasses and a cheaply made polyester uniform. But even before he uttered a word, my ingrained instincts took over. I didn't focus on his face first. Law enforcement officers never do. My attention went to his hands. Empty. Then his belt, his radio, his flashlight, perhaps pepper spray. No firearm, indicating a low threat level. He offered no greeting, not even a pretense of civility. He simply barked, "Sir, may I see your resident permit?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. Resident permit for what? For Redwood Crest HOA. All residents and guests must present authorization. I'm not part of Redwood Crest, I stated. My property line ends at parcel E971. I purchased it from the Lancaster family. He scowled as if I'd uttered something offensive. Do you have the paperwork on your person? I opened the glove compartment and presented him with the deed. He examined it intently, turning it over twice, clearly searching for an error. But there was none. The deed was unassailable. He knew it. His jaw tightened as he handed it back. "This will be noted," he mumbled. "By whom?" I inquired. He offered no response. He merely fixated on my license plate, memorizing it before returning to his SUV. He drove away at a leisurely pace, deliberately slow, watching me in his rearview mirror. I had seen that look before. It was the expression of someone who had already classified me as a problem requiring a solution. The subsequent morning, after collecting some necessities, I returned to the cabin to discover a pristine sheet of paper tucked beneath my windshield wiper. No letterhead, no signature, just a single bold declaration. Unauthorized structures are subject to community review. Community indeed. Redwood Crest Dominion concluded a full mile before my land even commenced, but intimidation rarely acknowledges boundaries. I did not panic. I understood the tactic. Aggressors do not issue a single warning. They probe, they push, they escalate. And Redwood Crest was not merely issuing a warning, they were conducting an inventory. At that moment, I had no inkling of the lengths they were prepared to go. But looking back now, the security guard's intense stare, that fabricated notice, the subtle rumble of something more substantial brewing beneath the surface. I should have foreseen it. They were not preparing for a discussion. They were orchestrating a hostile takeover, a takeover that would commence with heavy machinery and conclude with handcuffs. I carefully folded that warning notice and placed it in my jacket, attempting to concentrate on the repairs I'd scheduled for the day. However, once a person's intuition begins to whisper, it becomes exceedingly difficult to disregard. The following Saturday, I drove up before dawn. A low-lying fog clung to the road, weaving through the trees like a living entity. The farther I ventured, the heavier the air became, as if the mountain itself anticipated an impending event. Upon reaching the clearing, I parked and proceeded on foot, conducting a slow survey of the property. The original steel boundary markers remained precisely where they had been for decades. I verified each one meticulously, ensuring they were straight, undisturbed, and perfectly aligned with the county maps. There was no room for misinterpretation. Redwood Crest was not operating on conjecture. They were outright lying. I ventured further back, circling towards the tree line, and discovered something new, something out of place. A cigarette butt. Marlboro Red. Potent, inexpensive, and heavy. The kind favored by manual laborers and hired enforcers. Not the sort of item a Redwood Crest resident would permit to touch their meticulously manicured fingers. I crouched down, examining the indentation in the soil beside it. Recent, perhaps a few hours old. Someone had stood here, observing the cabin, observing me. Nothing concrete enough to report, but sufficient to confirm that this was no random occurrence. Around mid-morning, I returned to the task of mending the window screens. The consistent rhythm of the screwdriver, at least for a time, helped to calm my nerves. Then, I heard it. The slow crunch of gravel. I emerged onto the porch and leaned against the railing. A black pickup truck with heavily tinted windows crept up the road. It halted approximately 20 yards away. The engine idled. The windows remained down. The doors stayed shut. Only silence. Most individuals would have called out or waved. I did not. I simply raised my phone slowly, deliberately, as if preparing to photograph the license plate. Those brief seconds stretched into an eternity. The truck jolted almost imperceptibly, then reversed with haste, executed a turn, and sped down the hill. This was not neighborly behavior. Observing me, testing me, ensuring I was alone. And now they were clearly unnerved. By early afternoon, a profound sense of unease had settled in, prompting me to abandon improvisation and commence preparations. I walked back to the truck, retrieved a small container from the glove compartment, and extracted an item I had utilized countless times during surveillance assignments. A motion-activated high-definition camera, barely larger than a golf ball. However, the true ingenuity lay not in the camera itself, but in the shell casing it was concealed within. A hollowed-out artificial bird's nest adorned with a clay sparrow perched atop. From a distance of 10 feet, it was indistinguishable from the genuine article. Even at 2 feet, most people would likely remain unaware. I mounted it high within the rafters, tucked away in a shadowy beam, invisible to casual observation. Unless someone arrived equipped with a ladder and possessed precise knowledge of what to search for, they would never discover it. That camera would later capture the precise moment my entire existence unraveled, but for the present, it served as nothing more than insurance. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow on the porch as I prepared to depart. That's when I noticed it. A second notice, tucked beneath my windshield wiper. The wording had changed this time. Failure to comply may result in enforcement actions. Enforcement? I let the word resonate in my mind. In law enforcement, one learns to recognize patterns, and written intimidation invariably follows a predictable escalation. First, a suggestion, then a warning. Finally, a threat disguised as procedural compliance. I scanned the tree line once more. The woods were quiet, but not in a peaceful manner. It was more akin to something that had ducked behind cover just as I turned my head. I folded the notice and added it to the first one. Evidence belongs together. On my descent down the mountain, Dusk began to envelop the pines. The cold air flowing through the open truck window sharpened my thoughts. They were observing me, gauging how far they could push before I retaliated. Individuals like those associated with Redwood Crest invariably make the same miscalculation. They believe a man living in isolation in the wilderness is easy prey, but they were ignorant of my past. They did not know of the years I dedicated to tracking down fraudsters who considered themselves superior to the law. They were unaware of the patience a seasoned investigator can cultivate. This was not merely random harassment, it was reconnaissance. And those who conduct reconnaissance do so for a singular purpose. They are planning something larger. I experienced restless nights throughout the entire week, not out of fear. Fear ceased to affect me years ago. Rather, it was because every fiber of my being kept whispering the same admonishment: they are not finished. When you have spent 2 decades dealing with fraudsters, bullies, and petty bureaucrats who fancy themselves the rulers of a cul-de-sac, you learn to identify the underlying pattern. Silence is not the cessation of trouble. Silence is the deep breath taken before an act of sheer foolishness. By Friday evening, I had packed a small overnight bag and headed back up the mountain. I rationalized it as a trip to complete the repairs, but that was not the unvarnished truth. The actual reason was that I wanted to witness what Redwood Crest would do when they believed themselves unobserved. I arrived at the cabin shortly after sunset. The sky had transformed into that deep, purplish hue unique to mountainous regions, and the pine trees stood as stark silhouettes against the lingering light. The air felt heavy, humid, as if anticipating something. I unlocked the cabin, placed my bag inside, and then embarked on a slow, flashlight-assisted circuit of the property. No new tire tracks, no fresh footprints, nothing overtly obvious, yet the silence was not one of peace. It felt suppressed, as though the woods were attentively listening. I checked the disguised bird's nest camera I had installed the previous week, perched high in the shadows of the porch rafters, perfectly concealed. The tiny LED blinked once, still operational, still observing. I settled onto the porch with a cup of coffee, keeping the interior lights extinguished. Illumination blinds you. Darkness, conversely, enhances your ability to perceive. Hours passed in quietude, punctuated only by the occasional creak of the cabin as it settled with the declining nighttime temperatures. By 11 o'clock, the cold had begun to penetrate my jacket. Then, a sharp sound, a branch snapping somewhere along the tree line. Not the wind, not an animal, a footstep. I remained absolutely motionless. Movement attracts attention. Stillness allows you to vanish. Another footstep. Soft, measured, deliberate. Then a faint flicker, a momentary glow, as if someone were shielding a phone screen with their hand. Someone was out there, observing me, studying the cabin. I shifted silently behind a porch pillar, obscuring my silhouette. The footsteps ceased. Whoever it was possessed keen instincts. They sensed the shift in atmosphere. For 30 long seconds, nothing stirred. Then, the figure retreated back into the trees, not stumbling or running, but withdrawing, with the calculated intent of a future return. I waited a full 2 minutes before releasing my breath. Inside, I accessed the live camera feed. Grainy, but sufficiently clear. I rewound and paused the frame as the figure briefly stepped into the moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a baseball cap, work boots, and gloves. Not a neighbor, not a hiker, but a scout, someone assessing the terrain. I leaned back, allowing decades of training to process the unfolding pattern. This was not harassment. This was preparation. At precisely 3:17 in the morning, just as I began to succumb to a light sleep, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I sat up instantly. There, a figure advanced onto the porch, moving with slow, deliberate confidence. He reached for the doorknob, testing it gently, then with more force. The lock held firm. He leaned in close to the window, his face almost pressed against the glass. And then it struck me. He wasn't checking to see if the cabin was vacant. He had observed my truck outside. He knew I was present. He was verifying if I was awake. A cold, dispassionate assessment coursed through me. This was not random. He was evaluating my response time. He remained there for several prolonged seconds, then finally stepped back and departed the porch with the same unhurried calm with which he had arrived. Not fearful, not hurried, simply concluding his nightly surveillance. I saved the footage, created a backup, and meticulously catalogued it. Date, time, angle, posture, gait, evidence preceding action, always. Dawn broke with a pale, weary light. I traversed the property once more. Nothing new, no signs of movement, no further indications of intrusion. Everything appeared tranquil, excessively tranquil. Around 9 o'clock, I indulged in a minor, harmless deception. They must have been spooked, I reasoned. They won't return today. I still required additional supplies, after all. Screws, brackets, a few lengths of lumber. The hardware store was a 30-minute drive. I climbed into the truck and departed. Just another morning, just another errand. But while I stood in line for a coffee refill, somewhere up on that mountain, engines were already warming, gates were being opened, and heavy equipment was being waved through with the aid of counterfeit documents. They had not retreated. They had not abandoned their objective. They had simply waited. Waited for the precise moment they knew I would be absent. And by the time I turned my vehicle back towards the mountain, my cabin was already gone. The journey back up the mountain felt longer than usual that afternoon. Perhaps it was the way the clouds had thickened while I was down in town. Or perhaps it was that familiar prickle of unease in my chest, the kind you only acquire after decades of arriving at crime scenes just a few minutes too late. Approaching the final curve before the clearing, I felt it, not heard it, but felt it. A deep vibration transmitted through the steering wheel, akin to distant thunder rumbling beneath the earth. I eased off the accelerator. The vibration intensified. Then came the sound, a low, steady growl that every contractor, every farmer, every law enforcement officer recognizes instantly. A bulldozer. My stomach didn't lurch from fear, but from a chilling sense of recognition. I crept forward a few more feet, and the trees parted. The sight struck me with the force of a physical blow. My cabin, the sanctuary I had been painstakingly rebuilding, board by board, day by day, was obliterated. Not damaged, not partially collapsed, but utterly gone, flattened, wiped from the face of the clearing. Dust billowed through the air in slow spectral curtains. Splintered timbers protruded from the ground like broken ribs. The roof was nothing but pulverized plywood and mangled shingles. The foundation had been ripped open as if something massive had clawed its way out, and positioned squarely amidst the devastation was a bright yellow bulldozer, its engine a low rumble, its track smeared with moist earth, a work truck idling nearby. 3 individuals in reflective vests stood around, feigning diligence with their clipboards. I exited my truck, taking one measured breath at a time, not with anger, not with panic, but with a steady resolve. The same kind of steadfastness I employed when entering a dwelling where a tragedy had already unfolded. As my boots met the ground, something metallic glinted in a patch of mud. I walked towards it, my 20-year service watch, flung clear when the cabin was demolished, its strap torn, its face fractured, lying there like a relic from a forgotten existence. I took a step toward it, and the bulldozer advanced slowly, deliberately, directly towards the watch. I froze, not from fear, but from the sheer, petty malice of the act. Crunch! 10 tons of steel pulverized the watch into the mud. Metal snapped, glass powdered. The operator leaned out of the cab, laughing as if it were a crude joke. "Go ahead and sue us, old man." My jaw tightened, but my voice remained calm, more composed than it had any right to be. I raised my phone and initiated recording. "Who authorized this demolition?" 2 of the workers shifted uncomfortably. The third, presumably the foreman given the clipboard, kept his gaze fixed on the ground. We were instructed. I stepped closer, slowly and deliberately. "I didn't ask what you were instructed. I asked who signed the order." He swallowed, his fingers tightening around the manila folder he clutched. I remained silent, simply extending my hand. Open, steady, unblinking. True authority does not resort to shouting. It does not posture. It simply stands firm. A posture cultivated through a lifetime of confronting deception. Something within him fractured. He exhaled, his shoulders slumping, and finally placed the folder into my palm. Inside were flimsy demolition notices bearing a poorly printed seal, Redwood Crest Property Compliance Division. The accompanying plat map was a chaotic mess. Boundaries digitally distorted, file format incorrect, evidence of rushed editing in the form of drag marks, a forgery created by someone who evidently believed no one would ever scrutinize it. And at the bottom, the signature of President Veronica Hale, a testament to her overt arrogance. Arrogance rarely seeks concealment. I photographed everything: the machinery, the workers, the fraudulent documents, the altered map, the signature, the truck license plates, every boot print and tire track. A crime scene reveals the truth to anyone capable of deciphering its language. The foreman cleared his throat. "Look, we're just doing the job we were paid for." Another worker chimed in. "The HOA granted us access through the west gate. They assured us everything was cleared." That was the crucial detail I needed. Only someone with official HOA authorization could have opened that gate. I lowered my phone. "All of you need to depart this location immediately. If you are still here in 60 seconds, I will be filing trespassing charges against your entire company." The foreman offered no protest. Neither did the others. Within minutes, the bulldozer fell silent. Within 10, their truck was hurtling back down the mountain at the fastest possible speed without risking damage. And I stood there alone, just myself, surrounded by a field of splintered wood and a silence so profound it felt as though the mountain itself was holding its breath. I walked the perimeter slowly, meticulously documenting every angle, every point of impact, noting where the blade first struck, how the structure collapsed, where the foundation yielded under pressure. Then I crouched down and carefully retrieved what little remained of my watch, bent metal, pulverized gears, mud clogging the intricate mechanisms. I wiped it clean with my thumb and slipped it into my pocket. Evidence. Nothing more, nothing less. I exhaled, gazing at the scene of utter ruin. They believed they could break me by demolishing this place, but they had misjudged me entirely. They were unaware of my former profession. They did not comprehend the consequences of reawakening the dormant instincts within me. "This is not over," I stated softly. Not a threat, not a promise, but a simple declaration of fact. And the wind carried those words across the clearing as if in solemn agreement. I remained in that clearing far longer than was strictly necessary, not in mournful reflection, but in diligent study. When you have investigated a sufficient number of crime scenes, you learn to subordinate emotion to logic. Evidence first, pain later. The sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across what had once been my living room floorboards. I adjusted my jacket and set to work. I began by examining the tire tracks. The bulldozer's imprint was distinct. Deep grooves, evidence of a left-to-right drift, consistent pressure, indicating a professional operator, experienced, and thus fully aware of his actions. The truck tires were easier to analyze. Fresh mud was packed into the tread, the kind acquired exclusively from the upper switchback trail, implying they had not approached via the public access road. Someone had guided them through the HOA's private entrance. I meticulously traced the perimeter, capturing photographs at 15-degree intervals, a technique I once used to train rookies. Wide shots, medium shots, close-ups, footprints, signs of disturbance, the trajectory of debris scatter. Crime scenes never lie. People do. Near the eastern periphery of the wreckage, I discovered something intriguing. A strip of caution tape flapping erratically in the wind. The distinct Redwood Crest HOA colors crudely cut with dull scissors. I pocketed it. Then something else caught my eye. An impression in the mud, shaped precisely like the pivot point of a boot. Weight shifted. Toe dug in. Someone had turned abruptly at this spot. Someone startled, likely upon hearing my truck approaching the road. I photographed this detail as well. After half an hour, The clearing had yielded all its secrets except for the one crucial piece of information that mattered most: the timing. Veronica Hale had been circling my property like a predator for months, but even the most patient predators do not strike without perceiving an opportune moment, a sign of weakness. Therefore, I began to reconstruct the timeline in reverse. They conducted reconnaissance last night, confirmed my presence, retreated, waited, observed my departure at 9 o'clock, mobilized their heavy equipment, gained access through the west gate, transported the bulldozer up the mountain, and reduced everything to rubble in under an hour. This was not an impulsive act. This was a premeditated plan, and such plans invariably leave behind discernible traces. I returned to the truck and retrieved the folder the foreman had attempted to conceal. I spread the forged documents across my tailgate. Amateurish work, incorrect formatting, mismatched fonts, a flawed seal, inaccurate parcel boundaries. A novice investigator would have noticed the forgery from a considerable distance. However, one specific detail caught my attention. In the lower left quadrant of the map, almost imperceptible unless angled towards sunlight, was a subtle digital timestamp indicating when the editing software was last used. It was 6:14 in the morning. That morning. Hurried, freshly done, filled with urgency. Someone had fabricated this mere hours before my dwelling was razed. This was the work of someone who prioritized speed over precision, a careless individual. I captured an image of the metadata, mentally earmarking it as the initial clue to pursue. The subsequent clue emerged when I re-examined the demolition notice. Stamped diagonally along its border was a watermark from a local print shop, a modest establishment that operated solely on cash transactions. This implied that an individual associated with the Redwood Crest Homeowners Association had journeyed into town at dawn, produced spurious documents, and hastily delivered them to a demolition crew. This provided me with a time frame and a location to investigate. The third clue was the signature, the name Veronica Hale. It was executed with clean, confident strokes, perhaps too confident. Either she had forged it herself, or someone had done so on her behalf with her implicit consent. Both possibilities served my purposes equally well. Both constituted offenses. I carefully resecured all the contents within the folder, gently placed it in the passenger compartment of my truck, and surveyed the destruction one final time. Most individuals, upon witnessing their homes reduced to rubble, would immediately rush to the sheriff's department demanding justice. However, I had long ago learned that one does not enter an armed confrontation unarmed, nor does one approach a legal proceeding without evidence sharp enough to sever steel. Consequently, instead of proceeding directly into town, I drove to the elevated ridge overlooking Redwood Crest, a vantage point offering a complete panorama of their entire domain. Every thoroughfare, every entry point, every concealed area. From this perspective, the HOA appeared insignificant, contained, and predictable. I remained in my truck, the engine silent, observing the orderly rows of pastel-colored residences below. Somewhere within that orderly expanse, an offense had been sanctioned, and the perpetrators believed they had successfully evaded accountability. I retrieved my notebook, the same one I had relied upon for years during my tenure on the force, and began to chronicle names, timelines, potential scenarios, and leverage points. Every inquiry necessitates a starting point. For this particular investigation, the objective was straightforward. Ascertain who initiated access through the western gate, then identify who issued the directive, and subsequently trace the path of avarice. Darkness descended upon the ridge, and a chilling cold began to permeate once more. Yet I delayed starting the truck. For the first time since relocating to this mountainous region, my concern was not whether the HOA would escalate their actions. I was certain they already had. And I harbored another conviction. If they were prepared to demolish my home, they would readily resort to far more severe measures. This meant my endeavor had transcended merely compiling a case. It had evolved into an active pursuit. That night, sleep eluded me, not due to apprehension. Fear is a concern for the inexperienced. It was the lingering questions that kept me awake. Who authorized the directive? Why the haste in the demolition? What were they endeavoring to conceal before I even realized a transgression had occurred? Over the course of 2 decades spent pursuing white-collar criminals, I have gleaned one consistent truth. Individuals do not gamble their freedom unless the potential financial gain is substantial enough to impair their judgment. Therefore, the following morning, just after daybreak, I drove into town and positioned my vehicle across from the Redwood Crest HOA administrative offices. It was the identical location where their security personnel, acting rather clownishly, had previously obstructed me. The plaza was gradually coming to life. Cafes were opening, individuals were walking their dogs, and retirees were exchanging greetings as if it were a scene from a tranquil provincial town. Redwood Crest consistently presented an innocuous facade on paper. This very aspect rendered it particularly perilous. I observed the front entrance for a period. Staff members were arriving. Board members were sauntering in, lattes in hand. 2 groundskeepers were unloading equipment at the rear. It appeared entirely ordinary, almost too ordinary. Then a silver Lexus glided to a stop, sleek, immaculate, driven by someone whose hands had likely never encountered the coarseness of soil. It was Veronica Hale, the president of the Redwood Crest HOA, the reigning monarch of this pastel suburban enclave. She exited the vehicle, attired in a blazer that likely cost more than my former service sidearm. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her voice rapid, sharp, and tinged with stress. I lowered my window incrementally to better discern her words. No. The developer requires confirmation by month's end. Yes, we must secure the ridge beforehand, or the bonus will be forfeited. No, he does not reside here. His parcel is outside the incorporated boundaries, but we can incorporate it into the green belt expansion if we expedite the paperwork. That was sufficient. Sufficient to grasp her motivation. Sufficient to perceive the contours of the malevolent scheme she had orchestrated. It was not driven by greed or ego, but by real estate profits. The kind of capital that transforms ostensibly decent individuals into predators and HOA presidents into fugitives from the law. She concluded the call, smoothed her hair, and entered the building with an air of entitlement, as if the world were obligated to obey her commands. I remained in my truck, contemplating the situation. A developer agreement? A bonus? A deadline? That explains the timing, the rushed execution, the careless forgery, and the bulldozer waiting at the gate at sunrise. They weren't attempting to intimidate me. They were striving to obliterate me. I drew a slow breath, prepared to depart and pursue my next lead, when a movement on the passenger side drew my attention. A soft, hesitant knock sounded against my window. I turned. A woman stood outside, appearing to be in her mid-30s, clutching a beige folder as if it contained volatile materials. Her brown hair was pulled back with excessive neatness, and her eyes darted about nervously, as if anticipating an imminent forceful apprehension. I lowered the window slightly. "You are Michael Rivera, correct?" she inquired in a whisper. I offered no verbal response. She pressed the folder more firmly against her chest. "Please, I have very little time. I witnessed what transpired on the ridge. I believe they have crossed the boundary." "They?" I inquired. She swallowed audibly. Redwood Crest, the board, Veronica, all of them. I unlocked the door and gestured for her to enter. She slid into the passenger seat, closing the door with a soft click, as if fearful that the vehicle's dashboard might offer incriminating testimony against her. For a brief interval, she averted her gaze. Then she exhaled deeply and opened the folder. Within were printed documents, minutes from meetings, screenshots of electronic correspondence, preliminary drafts of land surveys, some of which bore the conspicuous notation, "Internal use only." She presented me with the initial document, an agenda from a board meeting held 2 months prior. A single line, highlighted in yellow, caught my eye. Phase 4, Creek Ridge Reclamation. Secure parcels E971 and E972 before the developer's deadline. Prioritize immediate removal of unpermitted structures. My cabin was designated as E971. I continued to leaf through the pages. The subsequent page contained an email from the vice president addressed to the board. If we can incorporate the ridge into the HOA's boundaries, the developer will provide a bonus of $2,400,000. This must be finalized by the 30th. Proceed with whatever measures are necessary. Whatever is necessary. These individuals had openly articulated their unscrupulous intentions. I looked at the woman. "And you are showing me this because?" Her voice faltered. "Because I voted for it." She wiped her eyes, a look of shame on her face. I believed it was merely a matter of zoning adjustments. Veronica assured me it involved only procedural technicalities. She never mentioned demolition, forging maps, or evicting residents who were not even members of the HOA. I observed her trembling hands. "I did not consent to this," she stated. "I envisioned HOA responsibilities as community service, bake sales, and pool regulations, not this." "Why are you coming to me?" I inquired. "Because you are the only one who can stop her," she whispered, her voice trembling. She informed the board that if anyone leaked any information, she would hold them accountable for the entire operation. Bingo. Fear, power, desperation, cracks were beginning to form in their facade. I took a deep breath, gently closed the folder, and placed it on the dashboard. "What is your name?" I asked. "Melissa." "Well, Melissa," I said, "you have just become my most crucial witness." She flinched. "I do not wish to be involved in a criminal case." "You already are," I stated calmly. "You voted. You participated. But now you are actively assisting in uncovering the truth. That carries significance." Her breathing began to steady, not out of composure, but with a renewed sense of purpose. I started the truck. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere quiet," I replied, to meticulously examine all of this, because now I possessed a motive, internal documentation, and a whistleblower experiencing a pang of regret, and after years in law enforcement, I was absolutely certain of one thing. When one board member begins to falter, the others start to panic, and panic invariably leads to carelessness. Careless individuals are easily apprehended. I did not return home after dropping Melissa off. Individuals like her are perpetually looking over their shoulders, and persons such as Veronica Hale ensured they had ample justification for such vigilance. Very well, I surmised. Let them continue to conceal themselves in obscurity, for I was about to illuminate their clandestine activities. I parked down the street from the Redwood Crest HOA administrative offices. Before exiting, I retrieved a small padded case from the glove compartment. Inside was a wall plug relay device, cleverly disguised as a conventional surge protector. Utterly innocuous in appearance, yet profoundly disruptive to the appropriate network infrastructure, I affixed a laminated identification badge to my shirt, a blue logo, Comcast Regional Systems. I had acquired it years earlier while investigating a fraud case involving individuals impersonating internet service providers. It's remarkable how useful old mementos can become. I stepped out and proceeded towards the building with the self-assured demeanor of someone who belonged wherever he chose to be. The receptionist looked up from her desk, startled but polite. "Hello, can I assist you?" I flashed the badge. Not aggressively, but in a matter-of-fact manner. "Good morning, ma'am. Comcast Regional Systems. We are detecting upstream interference originating from this block. It could be a switch malfunction or a failing router. I simply need to conduct a brief diagnostic check on your network equipment." Her momentary confusion lasted perhaps a single second. Then, a wave of relief washed over her face. "Oh, yes. We have actually had residents report issues with emails not sending and other glitches." "Perfect," I responded with a professional nod. "That aligns with the symptoms. It could be packet loss due to a degraded node. It won't take long." The majority of individuals possess little understanding of network terminology, which means they rarely question its application. She picked up her telephone. "Let me see if Miss Hale is available." "Available or not," I interjected gently, "I will be out of your way in 10 minutes. If I do not resolve this, it could lead to service interruptions across the entire neighborhood." The operative word, interruptions. A flicker of alarm crossed her eyes. She gestured for me to proceed. Of course, of course. Right this way." She led me down the corridor just as a door swung open. Veronica Hale emerged, sharp and imposing in a navy blazer. Her gaze narrowed the instant she recognized me. "May I help you?" I flashed the badge once more. My demeanor was professional and neutral. "Ma'am, Comcast Regional Systems. We are detecting upstream noise emanating from this building. I merely require 60 seconds with your main switch. If I fail to rectify the interference, it could result in a cascading failure throughout your block." Her suspicion evaporated instantaneously, replaced by the paramount concern of an HOA president. Resident complaints. "Oh, well, we certainly wish to avoid that," she stated. "There is a network room located down the hall. I will escort you." "Excellent," I replied. She unlocked the door for me. Routers hummed softly, switch lights blinked rhythmically, and a tangle of cables presented a scene identical to every HOA office I had previously encountered. "Do you require anything further?" she inquired. "Just a moment," I responded. "All I'm doing is checking for loopback errors." Again, technical jargon, eliciting immediate compliance. She excused herself, citing a scheduled telephone conversation. The instant she departed, I softly closed the door, knelt beside the power strip, and unplugged an unused Glade air freshener from the wall socket. I replaced it with the relay device. A green indicator light blinked twice, then remained steady. Connection established. My remote server, shielded by multiple layers of legal obfuscation, was now receiving a complete mirror of the HOA's internal network traffic, routed through publicly accessible ports. Nothing illicit, nothing invasive, merely passive observation. I interfaced with their administrative terminal, simulating diagnostic procedures, initiating packet refreshes, providing the relay device with sufficient internal network activity to facilitate its mirroring function. Subsequently, a folder appeared within the mirrored log files, labeled Phase 4, Ridge Reclamation, Confidential, and within it, 3 overlapping survey maps, 1 official county document, 1 draft from the HOA, and 1 flagrantly forged banjo, time-stamped 6:14 in the morning on the very day my dwelling was demolished. But the true revelation was a memorandum from V. Hail to the board members instructing them to ensure that parcel E971 was designated as community-controlled green space. Developer expects confirmation Friday. Remove prior owner references. There it was. The irrefutable proof. No, the entire arsenal of incriminating evidence. Footsteps approached. I continued typing calmly, adopting the persona of a board technician. A man's voice emanated from beyond the door. "Everything satisfactory in there?" "Almost concluded," I replied, merely clearing the noise. The footsteps receded. I unplugged the device, restored the air freshener to its original position, wiped down the keyboard, and exited with a cordial nod. "All set," I informed the receptionist. "Your signal should stabilize shortly." Veronica reappeared, attempting to project an authoritative air rather than her evident anxiety. "Everything is resolved for the present, but you should consider updating your firmware on a monthly basis. Outdated settings tend to precipitate complications." She nodded, her gratitude palpable. "Thank you. Please let us know if we can contact you again." "Oh," I replied with a polite smile, "I am quite certain we will be speaking again soon." She offered a laugh, evidently under the impression that I was jesting. However, the moment I stepped into the afternoon air, the relay device discreetly tucked back into my pocket, I was certain of one incontrovertible fact. The HOA was not merely cornered, they were exposed, and they remained oblivious to the fact that they were under observation. I did not proceed directly home after departing the HOA offices. An excessive surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins, with too many puzzle pieces simultaneously clicking into place. Instead, I parked my vehicle behind the old ranger station, which offered a commanding view of Redwood Crest. It was a secluded, disused location, long forgotten by all except hikers and individuals like myself, who preferred the embrace of shadows to the cacophony of traffic signals. I opened my laptop and established a connection to the relay feed. As anticipated, their internal network was already in a state of agitated activity akin to a disturbed hornet's nest. Electronic mail messages were flying back and forth, alerts were being triggered, and individuals were scrambling frantically. Panic invariably leaves a digital footprint. I had witnessed it on countless occasions. The initial electronic mail message originated from the vice president, bearing the subject line, "Urgent. Did anyone authorize an ISP technician visit today? If not, check internal cameras immediately." I allowed myself a slight smirk. They had indeed checked, but I had disconnected the camera's power source from the air freshener to accommodate the relay device. A seemingly minor detail that achieved two crucial objectives. They never saw my identity, and they could not establish that a technician had ever been present. The subsequent electronic mail message arrived seconds later from Veronica Hale. Subject: "This is not the time for errors." I opened it. Her agitation was evident. "We are currently under review by the developer. If any of you scheduled service visits without my explicit approval, speak up now. We cannot afford surprises. We cannot afford exposure." Exposure, a word frequently employed by those harboring guilt when they perceive impending trouble. Then another electronic mail message arrived. "Property owner E971 has posted something online again. Check the HOA Watchdog channel. Residents are asking questions." I leaned back in my seat. That was intentional. 3 hours earlier, prior to my visit to the HOA offices, I had disseminated a concise update on my anonymous channel. A bulldozer does not arrive by chance. Someone granted it access. 10 words. No overt accusations, no explicit blame, merely sufficient truth to induce discomfort in those accustomed to deception, and judging by their digital correspondence, they were already beginning to falter. I monitored their disarray for an additional 30 minutes before closing the laptop. Then, I initiated the second phase of my strategy. This did not involve hacking or unauthorized entry, but rather a calculated application of psychological principles. Individuals under duress tend to bifurcate. Some intensify their efforts while others capitulate. And a select few, the most significant ones, begin seeking an escape route before the vessel founders. They were the individuals I sought. Consequently, I composed an electronic mail message from a disposable address. It was concise, clear, and measured. "You have been misled. You are being positioned to assume blame. You are aware of this. I am aware of this. If you wish to discuss this matter, meet me tonight, 8:30 p.m., Ranger Station parking area. Come alone." I sent it as a blind carbon copy to every board member with the sole exception of Veronica. Then I waited. At 7:55 p.m., the parking area remained deserted. At 8:10 p.m., still no sign of anyone. I did not anticipate immediate attendance. Individuals rarely seize the initial opportunity to confess their transgressions to an unknown party. However, at 8:27 p.m., headlights illuminated the area. A white Honda Civic slowly entered the parking lot, an economical, practical vehicle indicative of an owner who did not derive income from HOA activities. The engine was silenced. A man emerged, appearing to be in his mid-40s, with a slight paunch and an anxious posture. His HOA identification badge remained clipped to his belt as if he had forgotten to remove it. He surveyed his surroundings like a man approaching his own demise. Are you the one who sent us the message?" he inquired. I offered no verbal reply. I simply gestured towards the passenger side of my truck. He climbed in, his hands visibly trembling. I should not be here," he stammered. "Veronica will dismiss me if she discovers this." "The good news," I stated softly, "is that she will lose her position long before she has the opportunity to dismiss you." He blinked rapidly. Then his composure faltered. "You do not comprehend," he whispered. "She is placing the blame on us. All of us. She has stated that if any information is leaked, it was someone else who forged the documents. Someone else authorized the demolition. Someone else managed the public outreach." His breathing grew more rapid. "She is preparing to attribute the entirety of this undertaking to the board. Bingo. Individuals who are guilty do not unite, they fracture." "What was your specific role?" I inquired. He swallowed. I handled the mapping requests, solely the preliminary drafts. He loosened his collar. I did not approve the demolition, I swear. She claimed parcel E971 was undeveloped land. She stated the county had made an error in their records. He paused, tears welling in his eyes. If I had known. He was not a perpetrator, but a component. And components fracture more readily than hardened steel. Listen, I said quietly. At this precise moment, you are not in jeopardy. However, those above you are, and they intend to utilize you as a shield unless you extricate yourself beforehand. His gaze flickered nervously. Will I face imprisonment? Not if you divulge the truth, I responded, and not if you undertake one additional task for me. He wiped his eyes. What? What is it? I slid a voice recorder onto the center console. You are going to recount everything to me. Every meeting, every directive, every instance where she pressured you, every occasion where she instructed you to disregard impropriety. He stared at the device, then at me. Subsequently, he depressed the record button. The confession spanned 20 minutes. Upon its conclusion, he exhaled as if a substantial burden had been lifted from his chest. Thank you, he whispered. I simply did not wish to lose my home. She threatened us. You have made the appropriate choice, I affirmed. He disembarked, returned to his Civic, and drove away into the darkness. I remained there for another minute, listening to the chirping of crickets. 2 board members accounted for, a whistleblower and a confessor. Veronica might still have clung to the belief that she retained control, but control is merely an illusion. And in Redwood Crest, that illusion was rapidly disintegrating. I departed the ranger station around 10 p.m. It had been a long day, and an even longer night lay ahead. The mountain air was sufficiently frigid to sting, yet I kept the windows partially lowered. Old habits die hard. One tends to observe more than one looks when suspecting one might be followed. The road leading to my property was deserted, excessively so for a Thursday evening. The initial indicator appeared near the old fire trail, a faint glint of reflection in the ditch. Metallic. Perhaps a license plate partially obscured by foliage. Someone had parked there recently. I decelerated slightly. I did not stop. I did not stare. Predators are easily startled. A mile further, I observed the second indication. Fresh tire tracks etched into the gravel bend. Wide treads. Inexpensive tires. HOA security favored SUVs. However, this appeared to be a pickup truck, likely belonging to the same individuals who had previously scouted my residence. Then came the third indication, the most definitive one. A black truck emerged onto the road behind me. No headlights illuminated its path. This was not casual observation. It signified intent. I continued driving. Calmly, steadily. I did not accelerate. I did not brake. Predators do not pursue unless you flee. Upon reaching the bifurcation leading to my property, I made a decision. I did not turn towards my residence. I veered right onto the old logging road, a dead end. To an uninformed observer, it might have appeared that I had cornered myself. To me, it represented a choke point, ideal for a direct confrontation. Approximately half a mile into the road, I brought the truck to a halt. The engine remained running, my hands resting casually on the steering wheel. The black truck pulled in behind me and stopped. Still no headlights were engaged. For a moment, an unnerving silence prevailed. Then, 2 doors slammed shut. 2 imposing silhouettes emerged, large enough to project an aura of confidence. Foolish enough to be present in this location. They approached deliberately, not with caution or tactical precision, but more like individuals who have consumed an excessive number of crime dramas and mistakenly believe that walking with a wide gait confers a dangerous appearance. The taller of the 2 spoke first. His voice attempted a deep timbre, but faltered on the final syllable. "Evening, Rivera." I offered no response. I simply lowered my window halfway. He moved closer, his breath thick with the scent of cheap liquor. "Not a good night to be out driving by yourself," he commented. "Fortunate for me," I responded, my tone even. "I don't place my faith in fortune." The second individual began to circle behind my vehicle, attempting a subtle approach. I observed him in the side mirror, his hands restless, eyes darting for surveillance equipment, as jittery as a youngster pilfering candy. "Beginners," the taller one declared. "The boss claims you've been poking your nose into matters that don't concern you." "The boss?" I inquired. "You mean Veronica?" His jaw twitched. He hadn't anticipated me naming the ringleader. "You need to abandon whatever foolishness you're stirring up," he warned. "You're causing significant distress to the board. Tell the board they ought to have considered that before they engaged in 4 felonies. He blinked. "Felonies?" He let out a nervous chuckle. "Man, you watch too much television. This isn't a picture." "That's wise," I stated calmly. "Because in movies, the foolish ones get dramatic. In reality, they make minor missteps." He frowned. "What missteps?" "For instance," I continued, "leaving your headlights off while following someone on a public thoroughfare." His complexion paled. I tapped my steering wheel twice, a prearranged signal. The old access road was illuminated by flashing blue lights, not official police illumination, but the reflection of my own truck's lights off a mirrored panel I had affixed to the trees the previous year. Merely an optical illusion, yet one that could unnerve novices. The second man recoiled, as if he had encountered an electrified barrier. The taller one swallowed. "Who? Who's back there?" "No one," I said, a hint of amusement in my voice. "But you wouldn't have known that until I informed you." Silence ensued. Then I leaned slightly out the window. "All I require is for you to convey a message." He hesitated. "What message?" "Inform Veronica Hale," I instructed, my voice a low rumble, like stones grinding together. "That dispatching novices after dark does not intimidate me." I paused. "However, it does indicate she is apprehensive." He instinctively stepped back, a primal instinct of predator and prey twisting within him. I don't desire conflict," he stammered. "You've already found yourself in conflict," I countered. "You simply haven't grasped the depth of it yet." I let the silence linger until it seemed to suffocate the air around them. Then, "You have 10 seconds to depart." They didn't require 11. Both men practically bolted back to their vehicle. Doors slammed, the engine roared to life. Reverse lights flashed with an urgency born of panic. They careened away from the logging road with such speed that loose stones peppered the surrounding pines. I watched their vehicle vanish into the darkness. I made no pursuit, no follow-up. It was unnecessary. I had obtained what I sought. Confirmation that Veronica was feeling the pressure, proof that she was escalating her tactics, evidence that she understood the walls were closing in, most importantly, evidence that she was foolish enough to falter under duress, and individuals who err invariably leave traces. I shifted the truck into gear and headed for home, my headlights piercing the quiet of the trees. Tomorrow, the true offensive would commence, not in the wilderness, not on the open road, but directly within her carefully constructed edifice of deceit. I did not sleep that night, not from apprehension, but from a profound clarity, the kind of clarity that precedes entering a chamber filled with deceivers and delivering their just deserts. The Redwood Crest Homeowners Association convened its quarterly assembly the following morning at the community gathering space, a structure of glass and stone situated with ostentatious prominence at the neighborhood's gateway, akin to a civic hall erected for individuals who meticulously iron their sleepwear. The parking area teemed with vehicles, sport utility vehicles, hybrid models, and luxury sedans gleaming with polished perfection. Individuals clad in soft-toned sweaters ambled towards the entrance clutching HOA documentation as if they were devotional texts. I positioned my vehicle on the adjacent public street, secured the truck, retrieved my compilation of evidence, and proceeded towards the edifice with the serene confidence of a man who had authored his own conclusion. At the threshold, a volunteer security attendant attempted to bar my entry. "This assembly is exclusively for residents," he stated, projecting an air of authority that only the powerless often affect. "I shall not disrupt proceedings. I replied equitably. I am merely here to observe. Before he could further object, another voice interjected, sharp and laced with veiled menace. And precisely what do you believe you are doing here? It was Veronica Hale herself. She stood poised at the entryway as if she commanded the very sunlight behind her. Her blazer was impeccable, her smile disarmingly lethal, her gaze calculating before narrowing perceptibly upon recognizing me. Mr. Rivera, she declared, you are not a resident of Redwood Crest. This is a private gathering. In that case, it should hold no bearing on me, I rejoined, moving past her. Unless there is something you wish to conceal from my hearing. Her jaw tightened, but she did not impede my progress. That marked her initial misstep of the morning. Within, the hall was a full assembly, chairs arranged in precise formations, a stage at the forefront, and a projector screen displaying the HOA emblem. A low murmur rippled through the attendees as Veronica approached the lectern, tapping the microphone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. We have several items on our agenda today, including updates on our long-term development strategies. She advanced to the initial slide. A comprehensive map appeared, detailing the Redwood Crest expansion, Phase 4, Ridge Reclamation. This designation encompassed the precise locale where my former dwelling had stood. I remained at the rear, arms crossed, patiently awaiting my moment. Veronica continued her discourse, artfully smoothing over facts, fabricating narratives, and contorting truths with the dexterity of a taffy puller, while the audience offered their nods of assent as if long skohul in applauding their own subjugation. Then she uttered the sentence I had anticipated. And notwithstanding any misleading information circulating online, I wish to assure all present that every recent action undertaken by this board has been entirely within the bounds of legal authority. I raised my hand. She noticed but disregarded it. I elevated my arm higher. A person in the second row turned, then another, and soon 10 more eyes were drawn to me. Within moments, the collective gaze of the room shifted in my direction as if the very force of gravity had been reoriented. Veronica faltered. Sir, she addressed me sharply, as I have already stated, this is a resident-only meeting. You ought to provide a response to the inquiry, I stated, my voice a low resonance that carried across the expanse of the room like distant thunder beneath a placid sky. What inquiry? She retorted. The one you just implied an answer to, I said, advancing. You are assuring this gathering that every action taken by this board has been entirely legal. It has been, she asserted through gritted teeth. Are you entirely certain of that? Her nostrils flared. I am absolutely confident. Excellent, I replied, stepping towards the table where the projector controls were situated. Because I would find it regrettable if you were to later claim you misspoke. I placed my thumb drive on the surface. Kindly play the file designated Internal Meeting, March 14th, please. The technical assistant, uncertain whether refusal was an option, cast a nervous glance at Veronica. Her countenance froze. It was too late. The screen flickered. A grainy recording began to play, and Veronica's voice emanated from the speakers. We claim the ridge first. Eliminate the outlying parcels. The county is overwhelmed. They won't notice. Get the bulldozer in before any complaints are filed. The room erupted. Gasps, hushed whispers, hands covering mouths. Veronica lunged towards the lectern. That audio is fabricated. It has been tampered with. This is an assault on... I interrupted her by changing the slides. A demolition order bearing a forged signature illuminated the screen. Her signature precisely at the bottom. Then, the corresponding timestamp. 6:14 in the morning on the day of the bulldozer's operation. Next, a drone photograph taken from my ridge, clearly showing the bulldozer's tracks aligned with the HOA maintenance gate. Following that, Melissa's leaked memorandum. Developer bonus 2.4 million upon securing ridge parcels. Proceed with any necessary actions. The attendees immediately turned on her. Is that your signature? You deceived us. You used our dues for this. What else have you falsified? She lost her composure in real time. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. Cease this. He is not a resident. This is harassment. I stepped forward, composed as stone. "Veronica," I said quietly, "you destroyed my home." A gasp rippled through the room. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." She pointed at me with trembling hands. You're merely some man residing beyond our boundaries. You possess no authority here." I reached into my jacket. Her eyes widened. Half the room held its breath. I produced not a weapon, but a badge. I placed it on the lectern as a judge would lay down a gavel. The room fell silent. "Captain Michael Rivera," I announced. "Fraud Division, Clark County Sheriff's Department." Veronica's knees visibly faltered. "You have committed document forgery, ordered an unlawful demolition, orchestrated real estate fraud, and threatened multiple residents." The rear doors opened, and 2 deputies entered. Then, my contact from the district attorney's office strode down the central aisle, carrying a stack of warrants an inch thick. His voice carried like a church bell. "Veronica Hale, you are under arrest for fraud, falsification of public documents, conspiracy, and destruction of private property." People recoiled from her as if she were contagious. No, I didn't. I was protecting the community. This is a misunderstanding." The deputies cuffed her. One board member attempted to slip out a side exit, only to be intercepted by another deputy. The entire leadership structure crumbled within the span of 2 minutes. As Veronica was escorted past me, she glared with unadulterated venom. "You believe you have triumphed?" she hissed through clenched teeth. I leaned in just enough for her ears alone. "No," I murmured. "I informed you last time. This was the gravest error of your existence." Her countenance fractured like glass under immense pressure. Then she was gone. The days following the HOA assembly were strangely tranquil, as if the world had exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. Yet the quiet did not signify an absence of activity. It indicated that the machinery of justice had finally begun its work, and once set in motion, it showed no inclination to halt for anyone. The sheriff's department transmitted my evidence directly to the district attorney. Within 24 hours, warrants were issued for 4 additional board members. They were apprehended discreetly. Early in the morning, no sirens, no fanfare, merely a knock, a badge, and the application of handcuffs. The demolition contractor capitulated almost immediately. He confessed to the cash payment, the accelerated timeline, and the direct instruction to complete the job before any objections could be raised. He also admitted to something more sinister. If the individual was inside, then he was inside. They assured me he was never present. That admission altered everything. An accidental demolition might be a civil matter. A negligent one could be criminal, but the conscious endangerment of a life, that was the sort of felony that judges did not easily overlook. Meanwhile, the Redwood Crest community began to consume itself from within. Residents deluged the HOA hotline. Meetings were suspended. Half the board submitted their resignations via email in the dead of night, all employing identical, unoriginal phrasing, like cowards who couldn't even bother to craft their own alibis. Their offices were shuttered the subsequent day. Computers were confiscated, paper files were boxed, and their financial accounts were frozen pending an ongoing fiscal review. Crowds congregated outside the pavilion, the very structure where Veronica had once boasted of reclaiming the ridge. Now it was cordoned off with yellow tape. Neighbors gazed upon it as if it were a monument to their collective credulity. A few approached me, some extended their hands in greeting, some offered apologies, and others simply regarded me with a blend of shame and relief. Then came the court hearing. I occupied a seat 3 rows back, close enough to observe every detail, yet distant enough to preclude any accusation of grandstanding. When Veronica was brought in, she bore no resemblance to the woman who had once strutted through Redwood Crest like a monarch. Her tailored suit was absent, her hair limp, her posture unsteady. She appeared as someone who had abruptly grasped the tangible reality of consequences. Her attorney attempted to construct a narrative. Clerical oversights, misinterpretations, delegated responsibilities. The customary justifications offered by those who believe their signature on official letterhead grants them immunity. The judge listened with an impassive demeanor. At one juncture, she held up the forged demolition order. "Is this your signature?" Veronica hesitated. "Too long," her attorney whispered frantically in her ear. "It bears a resemblance to mine," she finally stated. It was neither an admission nor a denial, merely a calculated attempt to appease the desperate instinct to avoid taking a definitive stance. The judge remained unconvinced, a screen illuminated displaying audio from the internal meeting, her own voice issuing directives to eradicate the outlying parcels and expedite the bulldozer's deployment before any official complaints could be registered. A wave of gasps swept through the courtroom, and her attorney attempted to assert that the recording had been manipulated. His delivery lacked conviction. He did not appear to genuinely believe his own assertion. Subsequently, the board members' confessions were presented, stacked in orderly pages, each revelation more damning than the last. Electronic correspondence detailing her instructions, preliminary drafts of fabricated maps, payment authorizations, threats dispatched to residents, and financial statements revealing the diversion of HOA funds towards expansion projects entirely unrelated to community betterment. Her expression shifted with each new piece of evidence: anger, fear, resentment, and ultimately sheer desperation. The judge denied bail even before the prosecutor had concluded his statement. Veronica's knees buckled as she was cuffed once more. One of the board members began to vociferously protest, invoking immunity. Another attempted to shift all blame onto a zoning subcommittee. Yet another claimed to have been coerced by external partners. Not a soul believed a word they uttered. And outside the courthouse, the repercussions continued to unfold. The county announced a comprehensive, independent audit of all HOA financial records. The developer involved in the expansion agreement swiftly disassociated himself, professing ignorance. However, electronic communications told a different story. Even if he evaded criminal charges, his projects were placed on hold pending a thorough review. The real estate sector regarded such a development as a death knell. 1 week later, the Redwood Crest HOA officially ceased to exist. A court order, stamped and final, irreversible. Their sign was removed from the community pavilion. Neighbors gathered to witness the event. Some applauded, some wept, and many recorded it on their mobile devices as if it were a celebratory parade. As the metal letters descended to the ground, an elderly gentleman placed a hand on my shoulder. "We all lived under that thing," he said softly. "I never imagined it would come down." "It did not come down," I informed him. "It collapsed under the weight of its own falsehoods." He nodded slowly, as if allowing the truth to permeate his being. The fallout from the scandal would take months to fully resolve. However, the most significant confrontations had concluded, and for the first time in a considerable period, I allowed myself to contemplate the future, to envision rebuilding, to carve peace from the ashes they had left behind. And that final element, that is where the narrative concludes, or perhaps where it truly commences. 6 months after the courthouse doors closed behind Veronica Hale, the ridge presented a different aspect, not due to what they had demolished, but because of what I had reconstructed. The insurance payout arrived first, exceeding my expectations. Then came the civil judgment, ample enough to rebuild twice over, but financial compensation was not the primary objective. It never was. My desire was to reclaim the ridge, not the timber, not the nails, but the land itself, the quietude, the existence I had envisioned for that expanse of pine and stone when I first acquired it. Therefore, I rebuilt deliberately, without haste, without desperation. I took my time, much like an experienced carpenter meticulously sanding a piece of oak. Methodical, patient, and with a profound respect for what had preceded it, the new cabin rose upon reinforced concrete footings. Taller, more robust, with clean lines and a broad porch overlooking the creek. A hunter-green metal roof that pinged with the touch of rain, precisely as I had desired. The sound was more than mere noise. It was a memento. You have endured this, and now the land acknowledges it as well. I installed 2 surveillance cameras, one conspicuous, the other concealed. Not from fear, but because vigilance is a habit one does not shed after 20 years in law enforcement. I fashioned a sign myself from a segment of cedar I discovered following the demolition. I sanded it smooth. Then I burned the letters into the wood with a soldering iron. Private property. Enter at your own risk. I affixed it to the pine tree marking the commencement of the trail, a subtle reminder to any individual feeling audacious. No one dared to test it, not anymore. The Redwood Crest HOA had ceased to exist. Their records were frozen, their assets seized, their bylaws archived as evidentiary material. The community engaged an external management firm, drastically curtailing their authority, instituting stringent oversight, and imposing an absolute prohibition on any further encroachment upon the ridge. A few neighbors dispatched letters of apology. Some slipped notes under my truck's windshield wipers. Others offered shy waves when they encountered me in town. I harbored no animosity. They were not the adversaries. Fear and a lack of understanding had made them followers. Veronica merely happened to be the one wielding the reins. One late afternoon, I sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, observing the sun dip below the tree line. The creek murmured below with a steady cadence, the kind that calms a man's heart. For the first time in months, I experienced a sensation I had not felt since before the bulldozer's blade made contact with my cabin. Stillness, not silence. Stillness, the kind that is earned only after traversing through fire and emerging with your boots intact. The land felt mine again. Clean, serene, steadfast. I no longer contemplated Veronica or Redwood Crest or the courtroom, the deceptions, the forged documents, the outcries within that pavilion. Those were chapters that had concluded on their own. Now there was only the ridge, the cabin, the pines swaying in the wind, a sanctuary for contemplation, a place for creation, a space to begin the true narrative. I had continually told myself that I would finish it one day, and perhaps, at long last, I finally would. Because peace does not arrive when the clamor subsides. Peace arrives when you consciously choose it, and on that ridge, watching the last vestiges of sunlight cascade over the roof, I had rebuilt it with my own hands,